We'll be starting in a few minutes.
I don't know if I've used one of these in a while. She also has many other talents. She teaches classes here sometimes, so you can come and check her out. And I consider her a good friend. Can you hear me? How about now? Crystal Newton is here. And she also won first place in the wild landscape this year. And I'm really proud of her. So here we go.
I think that might have been a setup. And can I move this forward? Is that going to be a problem so I can see my own slides? Okay, so I really have a question for all of you. And you have to participate or else this won't go well, okay? How many of you think in words versus how many of you think in images? Okay, I'll give you a second to consider that. And then words, raise your hand. Okay, we got 2 here. And then images. Oh, we got 3. Okay, so with me, who thinks in images, we're slightly a majority at the moment at this art place, art space, which doesn't really surprise me because artists tend to be drawn to images. But because of that, and a very short time period of trying to figure out what to say to all of you, I thought I'd better put something together to help keep me on track. But I still want participation, so you must actually, ask me questions, talk to me, it's okay. I don't want to just stand up here and talk at you. So let's see if I can go forward on this. Nope, it's not working. Oh, yes, it is! I want to preface this whole thing by saying, the only perfect people are people you do not know perfectly. This is something I've thought about a lot. And this is why it's really scary to stand up here and expose a little bit of who I am to you. And the number one enemy of creativity is failure, the fear of failure. So I'm not going to let that stop me from talking to all of you, but I do want you to consider it, especially as you consider your own creative endeavors. Go ahead. Make that mistake. It's not a mistake. So that's just kind of the preface. By the way, most of those thoughts actually came from my teenage son. It's a little scary. Next. Oh, nope, that's the wrong way. Sorry, learning this. There we go. Oh, I already asked you that question. But that's why we have illustrations. So how does an artist work? For non-artists, this is, I think, what they consider and what I really wish it was. That you get inspired, you do the process of the painting, you come out with this masterpiece, and then you hang it up. But that is not really the process. That's the wrong direction, Crystal. There we go. What most people ask about is how much time it takes. How many of you are artists here? Yep, we got 3 of those. Okay. They ask you that question most of the time when they're talking to you, people that are really non-artists. That's the biggest question on their mind. How much time does it take? Which I think is ironic because this is the part I feel can be taught. The part that I love teaching people, and that's the process. And by taking your time doing that process over and over again and just experimenting and not being afraid of failure, you actually shorten the amount of time. So when somebody asks you how much time did a piece take, are you going to talk to them about all those things that just didn't quite make it to the masterpiece stage? Are you going to include that time? I know for myself, I started drawing when I was very young. I came out of my room with a drawing at age 13, and my parents went, "Oh my goodness, how'd you do that?" But they weren't really as surprised as some parents might have been, because I have more than 8 artists within 2 generations that have sold artwork. So I kind of came to it naturally. I did want to mention this dirty little secret. Do we include this in the time that we take to create a piece, all those pieces that wind up in the circular file or in a flat file somewhere, but you're never going to show it to anyone because there's an awful lot of them for me. And really, I was surprised when I came in and found that I'd won this award because I feel like I'm just at the beginning stage of my artist career. And maybe some of you are feeling like, oh, well, I'm accomplished. I already know what I want to say or what I want to do. That's not me. So I'm also a little surprised to be asked to give an artist talk. So just wanted to tell you, there's a lot of little dirty secrets when it comes to artists.
Can we have discussion?
Yes, I'd love to have discussion.
I think there's a little bit more in between the masterpiece and the trash can.
Yeah, like I under-illustrated the amount that goes in there.
Right.
I totally agree with you. Absolutely. Yeah, like years of it.
Yeah, well, you might produce work and show it and in between. So
Yes,
there's a lot of work that it goes in the trash.
yes. Yeah,
Not every piece in this current exhibit is a masterpiece.
that's right.
It's very worthy to be here, and it's wonderful.
I want to point, I agree with you, and that's why this part in there in the center says art instead of masterpiece. Because you can teach that process of creating art. You can't always teach the process of making what we might call a masterpiece or what the artist themselves considers a masterpiece. And that is something that's more internal. So I appreciate that you mentioned that because you're right. This is not quite a perfect illustration of what's actually happening. This is what I think I experience more often. There are so many things that go into making artwork that are just not even really relevant to the actual final piece, masterpiece, you might call it, or art, depending on what you feel you've created. But, I looked at that and I thought, yeah, that's pretty much how I feel it happens, but I thought I'd try to comb it out a little bit, like take all those threads and straighten them. And you'll realize that some of these things here don't have words on them because I can't always identify exactly what they are. But I do know that there are a lot of things that influence why I started creating art. Things that I see, things that I've experienced. Yes, I put in there the color blue. Okay, I love the color blue. I really do. And just an experience, an expression of beauty that I see, which is why this exhibit of the wild landscape was so interesting to me because we live in an amazing county. We have been just overwhelmingly blessed to live here. It is awesome. So I did want to mention that on top of all the things that I feel like have influenced me or given me the ideas to create, there's people. I mentioned those 8 people in my family history who have sold at least one piece of work, and my grandmother was actually quite well known for painting in this county. Influenced me in this direction, and I'm not saying this like to stand up like the people do at the Oscars and say how they want to thank so and so and so and so. I'm saying this because you're an influencer too, and so am I. And we need to remember what our words and what our actions do to help encourage people to create. So you might want to look at the light green one up there, and I want you to think of the image of a cabbage, except for the image of a cabbage was drawn in pencil, and it was displayed at Cloverleaf Hall when I was a kid. And I walked up to it and looked up at it, because I was pretty little, and I remember being amazed by the detail the artist had put into the drawing of a cut cabbage. Now, all of you can think about it almost looked like my little drawing of what really, I imagine, kind of goes up in my mind. It's tangled, it's a mess, right? But this artist had drawn this so detailed and so beautiful, and I remember thinking, I wonder if I could do that. That's just so cool. And that was before I ever started drawing. Another one of those lines is my grandma She was amazing. She didn't really exhibit many of her paintings. She tried to, but back then it was a lot harder there was no Giuseppe Center, and there was really no way to get to your audience. But whenever I walked in her house, it smelled like oil paints and wood smoke. And today, because they heated with wood smoke, today that combination evokes these awesome feelings of, just appreciation for this work of art I knew she was creating. And she always painted stuff. She would paint for each of her grandchildren. She painted a painting for them when they got married. And she would ask you what you wanted in it. And that part right there, the asking, has also influenced how and what I create. Because to me, I have to create something for a viewer. That's part of the equation. I very rarely, except for stuff I don't show you, create stuff just for me. So another one of those stripes would be a professor in college. So I did not get a degree in fine art. I got a degree in graphic design. And I was showing my portfolio as the exit requirement, and the professor said, "Why aren't you a fine art major?" Because I had done a lot of illustrations for the graphic design. And I said, well, I have to make a living. And on top of that, I really enjoy working with computers. So anyway, he was kind of this influence of I do have it in me to be an artist that's creating works that are not for commercial use. I'm not saying that a lot of that can't be fine art. In fact, I find a lot of graphic design images, illustrations, so spectacular. I'm drawing a specific group of people who would want to hang it on their wall. So it's kind of a dichotomy in my mind. Another one of these stripes is my professor, Marge Weichel. Now, I know you guys do not know who Marge Weichel is, but she created a watercolor class just for me in college. And she and I went out and we did in plein air painting, and we had a blast. And she told me, and I never created anything I'd show you guys during that class, but she told me, you must write a book someday and keep going with the watercolors. She'd seen a lot of pencil drawings I'd done, and she thought they needed backgrounds. So that's Marge Weichel on there. And I'm sure that this white band here, to be named, I don't know who that is. Maybe it's one of you. Or maybe you're thinking through your life and the people that influenced you to be where you are. And I love working with kids because the promise is there of all their energetic little minds and what they have going on up there, and giving them the opportunity and the methods to create art is just, to me, it's like giving them maybe an energy drink that you shouldn't, but it gives them a joy. And I often try to tell them that they have a superpower. So I want you to think about that for a while, because one of them I've mentioned a little bit, and that is, come on, I've seen it over and over again. You guys know Wallowa Lake if you live here, and many of you really love it. And so that will resonate with you more than an image of, oh, I don't know, someplace you've never been. We are fortunate to have the art exhibits here at Giuseppe because we can focus on some things that locals find interesting and valuable. And to me, that's what makes this exhibit so amazing. All these people who have done things that are relative to and a reflection on the landscapes of Wallowa County. Come on. This is just some additional works of mine, and if you recognize the places, they're probably more interesting paintings to you. Now, how many of you here are hikers? So if you've been to Anarid Lake, that picture is probably more resonant with you than if you've never been there. I did not have to manipulate from the photo I took very much to get to that, because it was just what's so amazing in front of me. Maybe I should be a photographer, but then I would have another problem with something else. So here's some other pictures that may not resonate as much, but they mean quite a bit to me, but maybe for different reasons. That one was very, very small, and it looks like it's getting squished up here. But there's this strange lake at the edge of, or strange waterfall at the edge of Minam Lake. If you ask me, it looks like the lake should be about 4 feet lower because this waterfall, that's mainly caused by a bunch of logs, is holding it in. So as you're walking up the trail, it looks like that lake could just come down on you at any moment. And to me, that one was interesting. And then how many of you have experienced those January and February blues around here? Yeah, like, I'm so done with winter. I need some color. I need something bright. I need something cheerful. So when we start to get those crocuses coming up in the spring, that is a shared situation with people here. It's like this little peak of joy piercing through. Now, I'm not telling you I don't like snow. I do enjoy some of the snow, but just January and February get long. So, yeah. And then this one here, the deer is shelter beneath Hurricane Creek. That deer actually liked to stay hidden by my former house where I lived in Enterprise underneath a log all the time. That's where this buck would hide. And most people driving by probably never even saw him. But he was pretty nice. I enjoyed that. So that kind of relationship that we have with these images changes what the viewer thinks of them. And I think a lot of artists fail to consider that. Maybe that's my marketing background speaking. And I have been criticized, people saying, you need to find your own voice. And I'm like, yeah, but wait, what if my voice is about Wallowa County? Okay. Here's a couple more. And this one was in a show here, in the women's show. And I did have someone walk up to me one time and say, that's the best picture here, which shocked me. But anyway, we have a shared relationship with this too. We've all enjoyed that time period in the morning when the sun is just barely peeking over the horizon and brightening things up. However, I don't think you've ever seen that one before. Now, we've all seen the deer doing this, they jump over fences and they look like they must have wings. And I saw one last night. I've got to figure out how to put this into a painting, but I'm serious. That little doe, she just cleared the fence, no problem, but her feet looked like they were about 1/4 inch wide. It was like she was jumping on little tiny stilts. I don't know how she did that. Okay, maybe I need to make another one. Maybe that's how she's wearing stilts. But I haven't submitted that one to anything here at Josephi Center because it's a little bit different than our common experience. Sometimes, as artists, we want to tell stories. And I do have a bit of me that likes to tell stories. The second thing that was missing from my little circular diagram is that big tan background. My viewpoint, my worldview. And it is very different than some people's. I have to tell you about something that happened to my husband and I before we moved here. We went on a vacation, and we went to this very artsy town. And I was excited because I like going and seeing art and, little coffee shops, bookstores. This is my kind of place. But every piece of artwork I saw was depressing. It was not something I would hang in my room. It was gross. There was paintings of dead bodies. I'm sorry. This is not what I want to hang in my room. My worldview acknowledges that there is death, but I'm not going to paint it. It's not something that I consider pleasant to look at. I don't know why the artist did that. I never found out who they were. They may not be producing art anymore. I don't know. That was, it was in California, along the coast. Was it Carmel, I think, or something? Yeah, and that was years ago. So it could be that it's changed since then. I can't fathom that something like that would continue for a long period of time. I have another slide that maybe anyway. I'll get to a little bit about that in just a minute. So why I paint? That's not what I wanted to do. I paint as a response. And I know this is different than many artist, but I do. I paint as a response. I want to share thrilling or amazing moments with people. I've had so many. I mean, I remember being about 12 and I was walking up in the woods above my grandma's house up on the slope here, and I sat down on a log and I heard this funny noise. What is that? And I look over and there's a doe standing, she's a ways away. She's making this funny noise. I've never heard that before. And then in front of me, I have walked between two fawns that just pop up out of the grass and run over to their mom. Now was to me a thrilling moment that I would love to share. I haven't gotten to the point I feel I am good enough to paint that picture, but I hope to do so sometime because it was just amazing. And there's a lot of people that never get to experience that. Stop that. Another reason, I'm going to go forward here, but I'll read these first. Appreciation for the beauty of creation. You can hear that from me. You need to do something?
You said to not
Technical difficulties. Thank you. And my goal is to bring joy and peace to people. I want something hanging on people's walls that make them smile. And I am still as a process. Maybe every artist always feels that way, but I specifically feel that way. I really am just beginning this career. I was a graphic design and marketing person for years. And then we moved to Allowa County, and I'm like, I'm kind of done with that. I like helping small businesses, which I can do very much here, and I have few customers still left in that arena. But I really want to paint instead. So I'm just doing that transition. But one of the challenges with these images, and that mural was done for the Veterans Affairs office. I don't know if they still have it on the wall or not, but it was a big mural, and I've done quite a few murals since I moved here. The thing that's interesting and challenging about that excitement, that action, is the action part. I'm painting things in, flat surfaces. How do you show that movement? So this is something I'm still working on, obviously. And then those funny little movements, those funny little things, like, because I kind of like telling jokes. Well, this is kind of a joke on that fox, because those birds, they are so good at hiding. And when you really look at them, they're bright colored. How do they do that? I don't know. I do sometimes experiment in acrylics, and that painting over there, probably completed about 9 years ago, is in acrylics. Actually, both of these were acrylics. This one is one of my favorites, and I think it's displaying kind of squished here. But I love, personally, watching, I don't know if you've ever seen it because we don't do it here, but there's these races with teams of horses. It is amazing. They go through obstacles, and they're just through water, and it's going everywhere. I love watching that. I think it's exciting and thrilling. It's not really Wallowa County, other than the horses thing. But we don't do this. Maybe we should get going on it. I think it's really amazing to see the connection that people can have with animals, and to see how together they do amazing things. Part of that may also be there's been a lot of sculptors in this county that do represent that so well. I remember a sculpture of a old workhorse straining at the traces that just made me so impressed. That was one of the few sculptures that I was like, oh, I know it's $20,000, but I want it. It was so awesome. So then to go on to the next idea, and part of the artist is that we see imperfections in things. And we know there should be something better. And to me, that's a hint of our soul longing for heaven, for perfection, for beauty. You can't get that. Like, there's no real purpose for that, other than this little tiny hint of heaven that sometimes pierces through, maybe more here in Wallowa County than anywhere else. So this is what is. Well, it really wasn't that. The telephone poles that I faked in there for this presentation weren't at this location. But many times as artists, we have to remove things that we don't think really should be in the picture. So as artists, we get to kind of tear away that bad stuff and reveal what we think should be. And the people that were depicting death at Carmel, they weren't doing that. They were kind of doing the opposite. Let's add. I can't fathom that they actually painted from dead bodies. Maybe they did. I mean, I know Michelangelo did. But they were actually enhancing this feeling of death. I don't want to enhance that. I want to take away the imperfections. And I hope that those people eventually use their amazing talent to do that. Because I can't think as artists we can. Hello? Sorry, technical difficulties. So when I am appreciating the beauty of creation, I often try to find scenes that don't have a lot of outside things other than just the beauty of what's there. Now, don't get me wrong. I do a lot of old barns. I think they're really cool. And often when I'm painting them, I'm thinking, who built this? How long did they live here? What happened? Why are they gone now? To me, it's part of a story. And I think a lot of us need to also consider that part of the story that we're telling. This was a quote I found with a quick search. It was the first thing Google brought up, so please, I borrowed it like an artist, stole like an artist, whatever. Great art explores the mystery of human experience. Propaganda seeks to influence an intellectual decision stirred by stirring up obscuring clouds of emotionalism. I am so appreciative that so many people in this community just want to see the great art. If we always focus on that thing we're trying to present instead of that idea we're trying to get art for a long time, then our art, in my opinion, will fall short of its full potential. When we look at the art that we revere today from hundreds of years ago, it often has themes that are common to today, not themes that were common just then. I watched a really interesting show yesterday, actually by accident, about some people who were trying to track down whether a certain painting was created by this artist or much, much later. And it was based on something that in their time would have been considered ancient history. It was based on a Greek tragedy. How fascinating that even back then they recognized that great art is going to focus on something that's based on common human experience. That I'm good at that. Yes?
Well, we could discuss the first sentence there a bit more. So many of your works are natural scenes that don't have humans in.
That's very true.
You saw one on the guy riding the horse. But so thinking about that, your first statement there.
Yeah, maybe I'm not creating great art.
You are, but I just, so I do landscape photography, for example, and I realize that I usually strive to not have people.
Yes. Yeah.
Unless it's somebody I know and I'm working with and they become the subject.
I understand.
You know, I'll sit there for 20 minutes at a waterfall and wait for these people to leave. And they're done taking selfies, etc. And then I'll take my photo. You know. But so, how do you put the human experience into these natural scenes?
That
Is it invoking human emotion of whether they, you know, somebody has been there, knows the place, or it just recognizes something else? You know, tell me more.
I think that you definitely hit on a really critical issue. I'm going to restate it just in case people online can't hear it. You're asking about how we put in the human experience without putting the people in the photo or the painting. And I think that's a very valid question and one I actually struggle with because I'm sorry, but you do not want to see me paint people, at least not yet. Okay, but you mentioned that you'll wait at a waterfall until people are gone to take a picture of the waterfall. And I think there's something timeless about the waterfall, whereas the people are very time focused. You can normally tell when a photo was taken by what the people are wearing, what they're carrying, what their hairstyles are. So it becomes rooted and anchored in a specific time point in time. And you're right about unless you're working with a person specifically for a portrait. Much of the paintings that we see, I mean, I don't know what percentage, I would venture to guess that 80% of the paintings that we see in the Louvre or other great museums that are portraits were actually commissioned by the person that was sitting for the portrait. So in some regards, is that actually a reflection of common human experience, or is it a portrayal of that person for their own enjoyment or for their family or something like that? And they have endured down through history because these were sometimes considered great people. Now, I don't know if you know or have followed any of, and I don't follow this very much, but I happen to have watched a talk with the man who painted the portrait for Barack Obama that hangs in the collection. So it was a really interesting thing he is doing. And he had some interesting points that kind of speak to what you're saying. All these great portraits, these men on horses that were conquerors, he takes that same pose and he puts a street person from Chicago in it, or somebody he met in Haiti into it. And then he changes the background so that it is reflective of that person's culture. So he's often researching old textiles and stuff. And he's trying to make a point that it's not based on these great people that we have this great art. And he says he's kind of torn because he feels, great master. But as artists ourselves, sometimes and I think now we have the opportunity to portray something that is even more timely than that, because we're not specifically tied to who is paying me to make this portrait, who is paying me to paint this painting. That was the thing that caused me to leave marketing, because people would ask me to do something and then not want to follow through with it. And I'm kind of tied to what they want, even though I was the one that was supposed to be giving them advice. And you want to take a picture of this beautiful waterfall, or I want to paint a waterfall, or something that will be more timeless, and we're not tied to the patron. And that is that we are in such a different time period than the average artist was 50 years ago. My grandmother tried to exhibit her work, and it was completely, Josephi didn't exist. It was completely, she went to the fair, the Oregon State Fair, and she got her work accepted, but then when she went to pick it up, the only people that had won awards, she found by listening, were the students of the judges. She realized she knew this because the student would come in, oh yeah, I'm picking up Mary's piece and George's piece and Tom's piece. And oh yeah, George and Tom won the awards because, they're Professor so-and-so's favorite. And we can totally be disconnected from that now in such a strange way. That does, however, provide us the means and reason and need to self-regulate, if you ask me. Like, yeah, I think some of my work belongs in the round file, the circular file. You know what I'm saying? The trash bin. I hope that kind of helps explain what I would think of that. I don't think that I have completely cemented all my thoughts in that arena, and I do think it's a great conversation to have. Yeah, well, hopefully it was helpful. Yes?
You said that there's this universal image of the conqueror on the horse. You can all see it in Hollywood.
Yes.
And that's tied to a very human story.
Yes.
Is there a universal way, or the universal stories, in how we paint or photograph natural things? Is there a heroic way to paint a waterfall? Is there a warning way to paint a lake? Is there a way that these big portraitures, people have all these knickknacks in these pictures.
They do.
That are symbolic of sort of who they want to be.
Yes.
Is the same thing in painting and in photography when you're trying to portray a landscape in an ideal way?
That is such an amazing question. I do not know if I am qualified to answer it. I do believe, from my thinking, that Duffy Center has done a service to artists here because it represents the communities of art in many cases. If we took this same exhibit to LA, it would not be accepted the same way. So I believe that the idea of universal is, and perhaps maybe that's only because I haven't really painted things from other areas. I can enjoy something that's a desert scene, but I am not very fond of desert. That's just me. That's why I live here, not in a desert. There are some people that is the absolute epitome of solitude and beauty. I had a professor who liked to paint rocks. No, I don't mean she painted on them. I mean she painted pictures of rocks. I did not think that very many students in her class, while appreciating her technical skill, felt connected to those paintings. She felt there was a spirit in the rock she was representing. Well, she may have felt that, but I'm not sure the rest of the class did. Oh, ha! I think I was supposed to end because I went to that slide. But I do think that it's an interesting idea about, is there a universal way to portray something? And I do think there is a universal understanding, for the most part, of what beauty is, of that idea of joy. These things can't really be explained by any one painting. The person that painted the rocks, she found joy in the rocks. She also lived in the desert and she loved painting pictures of deserts. And a lot of people could enjoy the paintings of the deserts. I didn't enjoy them as much because I wasn't fond of deserts. But I do think that idea of showing the beauty of an area, I mean, I love going to national parks and seeing what's there. To me, it's amazing. And as an artist, I find it a great potential for source material. And I do think there is something universal about the idea of beauty. It's not exactly the same for each person, and it doesn't always bring the same measure of joy. But my goal really is to bring joy and the sense of peace to people when they see my artwork, to see the beauty and the characteristics of whatever it was I was painting. Now, I thought I had another slide in here that I must have missed or something, but might not have been important. Oh yeah, what's your superpower? So, I like to teach kids, I like to teach adults, but one of the things I like to tell kids is that they have a superpower. And this superpower directly relates to why I like to paint. They have the superpower of making people smile. And it is not actually hard to have that superpower. All you normally have to do is just smile at them. Oh my goodness, that's so easy. It's crazy simple. But maybe that goes to a little bit of that universal idea that as artists and as people, whether you're an artist or not, you often have the ability to make people smile, to bring enjoyment to their life. And it is a simple thing, but it can make a huge difference to people. So all those people that influenced me have now sort of influenced you. And we're all kind of woven together in that way by that universal appeal. Anyway, I am happy to take questions. Yeah, that is the end of my slides. Oh. I don't feel like I really had enough time to prepare for this. I apologize if it was shallow. I really started practicing watercolor in college. So that was a few years ago. But I didn't really start pursuing it as the form of art I really preferred to create until after my son was born. So watercolor has this unique thing that you can set it down and you dry it, so use it. And when you have a child running around your house, you don't want oils laying around. I've also had several friends who are artists who painted specifically in oils, and unless they were very conscientious about making sure there was airflow, there could be mental issues that were caused by those paints. Even in college, we had like 26 people painting in one studio. They made us use thinner, I can't remember what it was called, but it didn't smell. The problem was it still had the same effects on your brain. So I think that those kind of things are what made me drawn to watercolor. Also, there's something about the way, I personally love the way the light travels through the paint and reflects back, and that's a little bit less in any opaque medium. Now, some of the old masters for watercolor, for oil paints, really knew how to glaze and get this layered effect that provided translucence, especially for human skin, that was astonishingly gorgeous. And I think that has to do with that translucence. So we're all, when we're creating artwork, whether it's photography or any kind of painting, we're all just manipulating light and how it interacts with us. And that, I think because of that translucence, that's one of the things that really drew me to that. Any other questions? I mean, Thank you for asking me to do this. Next time I am going to give an artist talk, I hope I have a month to prepare. You just start writing down all kinds of ideas and then you throw a bunch out. Well, I didn't do that.
I can't imagine what it would be like if you, like,
You should be wearing a turtleneck. Oh, no. I do not do turtleneck. Sorry.
I had my turtleneck page at one time.
Well, I've never even been to an artist talk, so I guess I should go find out what I was supposed to say.
no, that,
It's great.
There's a lot of techniques in talks, but this was all philosophy.
It was, right?
I teach techniques. It's kind of boring.
just sum it up at the end for more techniques. My classes
That's
are.
right. I do think that the techniques part is it's easier to teach. It's easier to talk about.
That perspective, your perspective, like here, you know,
Non-artist, art
Right.
world person.
I think.
So, did you learn anything?
Oh, yeah. I mean, as someone who has very little background in art, I thought that was very inspirational. To see, and even Roger, you know, to have your input and questions. I felt like one of those little things on like teachers. I'm like, oh.
Well, we used to call these talks, we used to call these brown bag lunch, right? And then we realized that we're not supposed to say that anymore, so now we changed it to artist talk, which I feel like is a lot more fun. I think people are more open. And I quite honestly, before I didn't really think of them as artist talk, because I actually did one too, but it was like, not after I was here for like 3 months. And I was like, hey, this is how you make a poll. And, you know, it was very like,
You weren't talking about
hands-on.
technique.
I was like trying to get people to teach my class. And like, you know, it was very different, you know, and they were like, nobody knew that. But it was very different. And I think when we had these talks, it was kind of artist talks. And we really
Didn't identify it as that.
This feels much more focused on, you know, kind of listening about your process. You know, I always find that, you know, people's process is so interesting to me. I look up to it, and when we're talking about having humans in the scene, I think, you know, let's face it, if you're gonna sell a photograph, nobody really wants a photo of a random person.
Random person.
We really don't, we'd rather just see, you know, the forest or, you know, whatever, without these people, these strangers.
Unless it's like a big image that you can kind of put yourself in or.
Yeah, it's not.
So-
I was gonna suggest that,
Yeah.
that's the value of that, that sort of a scene that's like, oh, I would like to be sitting there by that lake, and, or whatever.
I think there's also, I think there's also some iconic things that maybe are universal. And I don't know that we've all identified all of them, but sometimes you experience them all of a sudden. And to me, it's like a flash. Flashlight. There was years ago, I was driving down a road, very busy road, and there's this lady sitting in the back of a pickup. And she looks so dejected. And she just, not physically like bruises, just beat. But that feeling that I got from her pose was iconic. Okay,
So and being a graphic designer, I've worked with an awful lot of icons. There's also the icon that I just captured recently. I would not sell this photo or present it in the way I captured it. I went down to Troy, and that's when I took a picture that I use as a reference for painting it. And there was this little girl there trying to catch butterflies in a puddle of water. And there were hundreds of butterflies. It was amazing. But this little girl bending over to try to catch the butterfly was iconic. We've all seen kids do something like that. It's very appealing to us because we recognize that childlike nature of she didn't know she could potentially harm the butterfly. She didn't even think about that. It was just this, like there's a fairy in front of her, you know, like, oh my goodness. And I think that sometimes the waterfall can be iconic. I mean, for me, because probably it was one of the first ones where I was in awe, it was Angel Falls by Momona when I was a little kid. Like, whoa, you know, and so I think that there are some things about the landscape that can be iconic. People that live in LA and have never been here, they don't know what that is. And that, to me, is sad, and we can try to present it to them. Yeah, there's this really cool place in Wallowa County, and it looks like this. You know, or we've got tamaracks. And
You do not want to tell them.
Okay, you're right, Angela. Okay, now, wait a
Don't go
minute.
to LA and tell everybody. No.
I like the subject of what's the iconography of landscapes.
Yes.
Because there's lots of idea of what's the iconography of portraits.
Yes.
I mean, what's the iconography of landscapes? And how that iconography doesn't have to be universal, it can be regional.
Yes.
And being able to point to a specific, especially a photograph, and say, what's the iconography here? Well, a lot of that is like rules of composition in terms of like like rule of thirds is a thing.
Right.
But that's not a thing of how do you symbolize a picture, that's how do you compose a picture. That the two magpies in the tree over there has a rule of thirds composition to it, but it also has some sort of iconography to it that isn't a picture. That's interesting.
Yes.
It's not a landscape. It's a territorial landscape. Technically, it's not covered in landscape. It's called territorial.
Because it's more close up?
Close. It's one tree.
So, I like that painting for a totally different reason than any of you. My husband calls those Wallowa County penguins because he couldn't remember that. And so we have this joke about Wallowa County penguins. So, to me, there's a totally different iconography than it is to anybody else, right? And I like magpies because those are Wallowa County penguins. But I know so many people around here that dislike magpies because they're mean, ugly
What was
birds.
it, 1948 and 58 when they were paying people to catch them, right? And so all you had to do is bring a pair of feet and they would pay you money.
Yeah, I believe it. Image in your mind many times when you go on the picture, you know. Yeah. So to you, there is a little bit of an icon there.
See, for me, I'm more like, wait, I have this subtle thing, but, you know, if I'm going to write, but I'm waiting for what's there to come to me, right? So
Interesting.
sometimes you have to wait till it's nighttime or, you know, whatever to really capture that. I'm not really saying every waterfall I expect X, Y, Z. I just go there and 1,000 pictures and maybe one that way,
Yeah.
right?
I'm not really good at
Sure. I don't know if I'm really good, but if you're interested in, like, a brief discussion of the second place photo was wonderful and
Yeah, I love
well deserved. But, you know, it's interesting to me because it's a landscape formed by a river.
Yeah.
But
You
you
don't
can't,
see the
you
river.
can't see the river. And, you know, but the lines in the image are what draw your line into the center. You don't really know what is the subject. Is it the rim rocks and, or the trees or, but this iconic business about it and what appeals to human emotions, what we don't realize is that that's a really harsh, unforgiving landscape. There might be cougars, you know. If you're trying to hike around in there, you might get bit by a rattlesnake, or you might fall off a cliff. You know, there's, that kind of stuff just doesn't necessarily come out, and in a human experience of a thorough knowledge of the natural history of a landscape like that. But it's beautiful, it's well deserved.
It is.
Yeah, and your images are, I don't know what the right term is, but they're beautiful. They're a little bit pastoral.
Ethereal,
Yeah, and you know, like Aneroid Lake, I know that place well, in winter as well as summer.
I wish I could get there in winter.
Yeah, but you know, but it's an amazing place.
It is.
That inspires,
It
you know,
does.
emotion in me, seeing your image, and you know, brings back.
Yeah.
Yeah, but also, you know, difficult emotions too,
Oh, yeah.
because, you know, I think that element of it, you know, like dead bodies, that doesn't really sell.
No. Well, that's why when we were walking around that place, we just could not believe, because it wasn't just one gallery. It was like 3 or 4. And at first I didn't even recognize what I was seeing. And then I started reading the titles. And I'm like, why would someone choose to represent this?
A lot of art is about disturbing. When, you know, it's
So
about where
that-
can you take the human experience to this disturbing level so they're paying attention.
Yeah, and I understand that, but to me, part of that's one reason why I put that quote in there about the difference between fine art and propaganda. Or, there might be something slightly more subtle than the word propaganda that might better describe it. But agenda, yeah. The painting, the artist, and I so apologize, I don't remember his name, who painted Barack Obama, and the way he was doing it, and the way he described what he was doing. So if he described it a different way than he had, it would, in my mind, have become propaganda. But it wasn't. He is elevating people that he finds on the street of wherever he goes. In his mind, he's putting them in this classical pose, which has a lot of that iconography feeling to it, because of the pose all in and of itself. And he's a classically trained artist. But then putting them in a background that is relevant to who and where they are is also quite interesting. And they're very repetitive backgrounds. The one with Barack Obama is a bunch of, it looks like a huge vine. But he mentioned that these are, the flowers that are in that painting are all from places that he lived. So that meant a lot to President Obama, that he put these flowers in there that were their iconography about where he lived. So, yeah, I think that's kind of, it's just really, like, there's a delicate balance, because I think we all have something to say, and I'm not trying to say that using art for your propaganda reasons is bad. In many cases, that's where artists get paid. But we also have to recognize that some of it is, what's the longevity on that meaning in that piece? What's the longevity on the message that you're giving if it's purely for propaganda's sake? So I have had cause to think of that lately. So.
I'm sorry I didn't catch the first part here, but
No, that's right.
listening to you and to Roger, I haven't heard the word empathy. And it seems to me that a lot of fine art, photography particularly, but other art too, is all about empathy. It's about the viewer having empathy for what's going on in the artwork.
That is a good word to use.
And I mean, the iconic thing there are the photos from the WPA during the Depression. And you remember the photo of the woman, and, you know, in the Dust Bowl? I mean, you know, those things are, or when you think about Vietnam,
Oh, yeah.
you think about the screaming child running. Now that, beautiful, no, but iconic,
Yes.
incredible photo, which allows you to empathize with that poor girl. And
Maybe that's the human experienced it in difference.
Pardon?
Maybe that's the difference we're looking at here, is that art and the fine art that was applauding here invokes an empathetic reaction, whereas propaganda is all about a sympathetic reaction.
That's a very good.
Right? It's like, how do we,
Yes.
how am I supposed to project onto this person versus how is this seen by?
Yeah, that's a very good way to put it. I like that, I appreciate that you bring up that word empathy. I think that almost every person from Loudoun County that walks in here has a type of empathetic response, just even to these landscapes.
Yeah.
Because they understand them. Like you were saying, that painting, that photo is amazing, but you don't always get the sense of how dangerous that landscape could be. So, you know.
Yeah, but we can empathize with danger too.
Yes, we can. Yeah.
And distress, and we can empathize with a lot of things.
A very current example, I saw an incredible photograph recently of a bunch of abandoned vehicles completely burned up on Front Street in Lahaina and Maui.
Yeah,
And that invokes great empathy for me,
Yeah.
and there were no people visible in the photo. It
Yeah.
was just these vehicles you knew people had to flee,
Right.
abandon their cars in a traffic jam, and all the cars were just
Destroyed.
burned shells, and just something like that. What
So,
an incredible image to capture.
I think that kind of reflecting on that idea, there's a couple images that come to my mind that have actually provoked action in me. And I think that that idea of empathy provoking an action or a reaction or an action of some form, activity on our part. My husband has some cousins that lost everything in Maui. And we just heard about it, and they have a GoFundMe page to help them recover, to evoke and remind us of this response to, as humankind, in 200 years. I don't know. You know, I mean, maybe it will evoke and remind us of this tragedy, and maybe it will help us remember not to allow such things to happen again by, I've understood that they haven't been very prepared in Maui for this type of potential problem. So maybe that is a historic reference, but I'm not sure, I just question in my mind whether or not that will have the same empathetic response 100 years after the event. There's a lot of pictures of the two towers after they were hit that are just extremely iconic in my mind. I don't want to hang them up on my wall. I don't mind seeing them, especially if I have a book about the events or about the people that perished there, or if they're showing a movie about it or something. But I'm not sure that in 100 years they have that same kind of impact. And it's not that it's bad that we create them or that we have them or we look at them and consider them iconic, especially in our own time period. But as an artist, am I seeking to only present something that is valuable right now, or I think this is just something that artists sometimes wrestle with.
There's a wisdom of age on this bit. In the youth art show, these are kids that were born at earliest, 2002 to 2005, that era. But there were 2 or 3 images of the two towers scattered across, and some of them from like 5 or 6 year olds. Those, what were they painting? They weren't painting empathy, so, but they were painting some sort of sympathy. It was a painting about our collectiveness about the two towers, not about their experiences with them.
No, that's true.
For me, usually, artists like people is paralleling the history of time, so, as we use that to see what happened, 50 years, 100 years ago, with the art, right?
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
I think usually we're painting now, so let that, 100 years they can see, what was happening. It's like the Holocaust, right?
Yeah.
images, we have those images to show what happened.
Right.
What are we thinking of, probably like all that post-COVID stuff, right? You know, as far as it, because, you know, this is great, landscapes are great, but there is a whole world out there, you know, where
Of the
there's
history.
a lot of serious artists that are, you know, issues.
Right,
You
yeah.
know, there's a lot of issues in society. So I don't see it as propaganda, I see that as, this is what they see happening in front of them.
Yeah.
And so that's how they record it, that's how they interpret it, that's how they express
Well,
it.
there's flat out education for what's it, preservation.
Yes.
Yes.
I mean, Emily Carr goes off and paints all those totem poles in British Columbia and Alaska because people are stealing, cutting them, sending them off and selling them in New York. And so and there are a lot of problems with that. And if you read about her, she goes through a lot of different emotions when she's doing it, about whether she's doing the right thing. She goes out to France and studies painting for a year and comes back. I mean, it's a complicated deal, but still in all, the images we have of thousands of totem poles that are now gone are Emily Carr's images with the emotions that she had at the time. And the most famous example of that is Edward Sheriff Curtis and his photos of American Indians, which are now 125 years old. And they're the images we have of those people. And he was criticized at the time for dressing them up when they weren't actually at their nadir. They were in terrible shape and pain to take their photos. But the fact is that we have those images now, and even the tribes are going back to those images. For instance, the Macaw went back to his images of the boats when they started making boats again.
Or in their regalia.
Pardon?
The natives photographed by Curtis were in their regalia, and,
Yes,
you know,
yeah.
and then some of that
Yeah.
knowledge of that was lost. And
Was
you
lost.
go back to those images.
So, and what,
and understand.
you can use the word propaganda, what Edward Sheriff Curtis was trying to do at the time was he thought Indians were, he said, the vanishing race. And so he set out to capture all the Indians in America before the end.
Documentation.
Documentation.
Yeah, so from my perspective, from what I would think of that is there's a difference between the documenting what's really happening and the propaganda. I would distinguish those two. Because when you go online and you look at some artist work right now, some of it is imaginary things. And you'll hear them talk and they act as if certain things actually were real. And you're like, wait, what? Hey, let's rewind, let's re-examine, and wait, that's not right, that's not real.
But it is art, right? I mean, art is, it's subjective, it's interpretative.
Well, my flying deer's not
Yeah.
real, but I'm not telling you it is.
None of us believe it is.
Right, exactly.
So, you know, it's, the viewer is interpreting it themselves, right?
Right.
There's something different between documentation.
Yes, there
And I'd be
is.
worried if that was not true to history.
Exactly.
And even that is done with artistic, I mean, Edward Sheriff
Sure.
Curtis
Oh,
was a master of composition, right?
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah, and
a lot of
sometimes-
documentation is incredibly beautiful and artistic. But
Right.
at the same time, you know, when I go to the art museum, I'm like, okay, I'm in this fantasy world, right?
Yeah.
And yes, a lot of it does parallel history, but let's face it, you know, there's also artistic license and, you know.
Oh, yeah.
You
There's
could
an
plop a
extra amount.
tree in front of your landscape.
That might not be there.
A tree from the Midwest and no one would, you know, who would be the wiser, you know? But it's yours to give.
Right.
It's your thinking, you get to decide.
Right,
So
Yeah.
we're just the viewer.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I do, like I said, I think that there is that interaction between the art and the viewer that is really regional, and it is, you can't overlook it in terms of whether or not someone would count it valuable. And as artists the modern, any museum of modern art.
MoMA.
It
Yeah.
just does not fit. Okay, that's just not what, now I could probably aim at something like that and it'd probably fail.
The Louvre. Just go to the Louvre.
Then go for directly, yeah, no, I don't think so. But, I mean, and I think it's interesting to have these conversations about, okay, what is the difference between the propaganda that some of the artists are creating, and I am saying they are amazingly talented people. I mean, I just wish they would kind of drop the propaganda so I could just see their art, because sometimes.
An example.
I saw an artist talking, and turn this off very quickly, because this artist was talking about the American society, cities in the South. We bombed them all by airplane. That was the example I think he did the best. I was like, what?
So he was painting pictures of such, or?
Yes, and oh, we flew airplanes over these cities and dropped bombs on them. Really?
Maybe he was telling, maybe that's like a story, right? Like, our pictures are stories, right? They're like, you know.
This is what this person believed. This was propaganda. And this was, and I don't know who told this person this propaganda.
Yeah.
They shouldn't have been a history teacher. I happen to be married to someone who's deeply in love with history. And I read a lot of histories. It's one of my favorite things to do, or listen to books on tape about histories. And I love the history that's represented up here. I wish my family hadn't lost touch with our ancestors that I know came from Germany, and guess what? I'm part Native American, but they would never tell. There's so many people that are like that. So's my husband. He has no idea what you're doing. Yeah, because we lost that. That's a bad thing. Is that going to be the focus of my art? No. I'm sorry. I don't feel strongly enough about that. And I don't think it would resonate with nearly as many people as the landscape that is right there.
Well, John Keats, Ode to a Gresham Mill, one famous old poem, and it's the artist in that case, Keats, reflecting on a ceramic vase that is describing he's using that vase to say, oh, it wasn't just an ideal time in the past. And I think that, is that vase, in this imaginary vase, intended as propaganda? It certainly is, because he is invoking sympathy in the readers about this time and this place where this was going. I wonder what iconography you have to put in a real vase to be able to get that sort of universal sympathetic dynamic piece. What's this universal iconography talking about?
Yeah.
Well, you know, I mean, I feel like there's a lot of metaphors, right? You know, you could say this guy is saying, places your mom, but maybe that's really just a metaphor for, you know, something else, something bigger, something more empathetic.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of what we've done, you know, damage to a lot of culture in this country, and, you know, that could just represent his interpretation of what we've done in a more, like, severe way. Yes, right, so, that's just his interpretation.
Yeah.
You know, like,
It's hard to
bombs that we dropped that we didn't advertise.
there you go. Well, we actually have dropped some bombs on some.
Oh, yeah.
So, in this country.
and no attempt to even sidestep that there has been atrocities committed by every nation in the whole world. And I think that those atrocities are horrible. I just don't want to be representing that as my artwork. I'm not
Sure.
after that horror factor that,
Yeah, I
that.
mean, landscapes are nice and fluffy, and you don't.
That's what I mean. I like it.
have
That's
to
what I
worry
mean.
about all of this other political
Well,
stuff.
right now you already, with all the Oppenheimer stuff now.
Yeah, right. We
We're
could take
getting
us
it, now
back,
you're getting pictures.
going back to that.
We're back to pictures of the mushroom clouds, you know?
Right.
Here's an example of a recent exhibit that I saw in 2020 in downtown Portland, Salmon River Fountain, during the social justice unrest. someone set up a traveling exhibit, a series of individual portraits of people of color who had been killed by police. And we don't know, you know, there was information about the individual, their name, their, you know, sort of biography, something about them, but we don't really know the details of
The circumstances.
was it justified or not, and was a decision made by a court of law, or a jury, whatever, all those things, but is that propaganda? Maybe, but it's real, it's a known fact that these people are no longer with us, and that's what this was all about. And then some of those images were also used much more prominently on display, definitely for propaganda, when the riots, if you wish to call them that, completely destroyed the Apple store in downtown there, and then they boarded up the Apple store with plywood, and people painted their images of these individuals right on the plywood, much larger than life.
Last week, I went to Portland.
And I got photographs of all this stuff too. 'Cause I was there.
Yeah, I went to Portland last week with my son, 14-year-old, and he has not been in downtown big cities very much, even though his dad came from LA. But his expression was, we don't ever have to go back there. Because something that was beautiful is in the process of being destroyed. And so is that a result of these images and the interpretation the viewer has of these images? Or is it something else that's going on? And to me, I feel like artists need to be a little responsible for what they push people to do or behave. To me, I'm like, okay, I don't understand why you would want to destroy the neighborhood you live in. I really don't get that. Okay, that is not a reflection on your neighborhood, that's a reflection on you. And to me, that's a little horrifying. My husband has had to work in Watts, and he knows what he had to accomplish to work there. He was around during the Watts riots. He was, so he's had this, and his best friend's Cuban. I mean, it's not like, he was in the busing stage in LA. I don't know if you know what that was, but they decided that they were going to mix up everybody from various cultures. So some kids, poor kids, were on a bus for 2 hours. Yes.
I'm from Ohio, they do that with these things.
Yeah. So as a result, my husband was the minority at his school, which he was most of the time the minority anyway, because whether it be blacks or Hispanics or whatever, he was the minority. All right. Anyway.
So he's a white guy.
He's white.
I was just kidding.
He just is also part Native American, and nobody sees that, and it's not, it's not part of like because he's American.
Well, what I would say to Roger, to those images, people were painting of these people that were killed by cops, and we don't know the circumstances surrounding it, but, I mean, they're using it, I don't see it as propaganda unless people are trying to make money off it or whatever. I see if somebody's painting an image, and, I'm just gonna say George Floyd because I know his name. I think they're showing this guy who's a martyr, right? Where she's saying this guy, he did all things, and now we're all waking up. Oh, wow, the cops are killing black people, what? Oh, what? It's been going on for decades. Now we have cell phones, right? Think of all the people we don't even know about. I mean, it's like mind-boggling to think of how many people lost their lives just because they were black and the cops, I mean, our history, right, in this country. I can't speak for the world, but when I hear these paintings of these people that were killed by cops, like Breonna Taylor, like, I feel like they know the facts pretty well, and, she doesn't deserve to die if somebody wants to paint her picture, and she becomes kind of a symbol, right, a martyr. And of course, people can use it for bad or for good, I suppose.
Sure.
But I think it represents a way bigger problem after those people.
I think that part of
That's
it.
the icon.
The icon,
I think
yeah.
that the artists kind of absolve themselves of responsibility. If you
there's also another side of the story that no one wants to tell. And if you ever do want to find out the really interesting thing, follow the money on BLM. They made millions and millions and millions, and they're still making millions off of all these corporations that are just penning their money. I saw a list one time and I was a little horrified. So I used to be married to a cop. He was a cop in Orange County, California. One day he came home from work and he was quite upset and he said, well, had to arrest an LA cop today, an LA police officer. They came into my town and they were beating up a Mexican dude. So I had to arrest him. He happened to be black dude, the LA cop. Okay. So he was watching this violence. And he didn't know the guy was a cop when he arrested him, but the guy's like, don't arrest me, I'm a cop. I'm your, you know, they do have this thing where they support each other. But he wasn't going to allow violence on this man. That, I mean, all of that activity was illegal. But, and I don't know, I don't remember, or I don't think I ever heard if it went to court. It probably got dismissed because the guy doing the beating up was a cop. And that's wrong. That's illegal. And my husband would have been furious about that. It's not right for police officers to abuse their power. It's illegal. It's also not right for anybody to abuse a situation. It's illegal! You know, let's just enforce the laws. And
You know, how each individual interprets it is really up to them. And, you know, it could be 100 people with a different interpretation. And that's kind of the fun of it, right? It's there to be both. People can be very different about it. And as an artist, I don't have a responsibility to what you think. That's not my problem. Well, emotion, or if you're, you know, some artists there just to disturb you, to wake you up. You know, like, I don't know, you've ever been to an art show and there's like, I don't know now what this is great. I'm not going to say it, but you know, something that is not, you're just like, that's not really my taste, my flavor, but it's drawn my attention. I've got, you know, it's so I mean, art evokes emotion. What emotion is that?
do you think there's any emotion that an artist should
Just decided to not mention something. What that was over there. I don't know why you said not to mention it. You said, oh, I'll do this elsewhere. So
Well,
I-
because it was like, it's inappropriate for her to hear a couple words.
Exactly.
So that's why.
Artists are
Exactly.
beholden to the community.
Sometimes there's things that we shouldn't, if you are going to, let's put it this way. It would be very easy right now for some of us, not me, to go on TikTok, YouTube, elsewhere, or even get an email, sign up for an email, for people who want to post and publish and consider art videos of themselves killing people. Killing. It has been done.
Isn't that a snuff film? Isn't that like a thing?
Well,
A snuff film.
is it good? Is it right? Well, I mean, so there's a
How is
responsibility.
that art? But then that's where you say, is that art?
Is that art, right?
I mean, a lot of
So
people.
that's where I make the distinction with the idea of fine art versus propaganda, and I think that's what you're saying, is that there is some form of responsibility within the artist to consider, and it's different if you're going to create a piece that's in your own house and never supposed to be seen by someone, or in your own studio, or whatever. That's a little bit of different, to me, that's a little bit different than something that you're making for public consumption. So, yeah, there is a lot of pornography out there that people consider art. Sorry, I'm not one of those people. I
So
think-
the statue of David, do you think he needs a big leaf? Or
No, that's not pornography. There's a very big
Well, I
difference
agree,
between.
but there's a whole group of people who are like, hey, cover that up. You know, it's a human body. What's the big friggin' deal? You know, like we
Right.
all have one.
But it's treated respectfully.
So-
And it's not, yeah,
But right, so then we get to that slippery slope of, you know, where is that line of, you know, okay, the human body, I think that's the most perfect example, right? You know, what's suggestive, what's inappropriate, what's, you know, is this, you know, we talk sometimes when we have exhibits here, you know, like, let's say the women's show, like, should we put this image in because of kids come through here?
right.
We are trying to be personally responsible for that. But some of that stuff is amazing. So, I mean, you know, it's.
Yeah, I do think there is an intent though. I do think that there's a responsibility for the intent. I do not believe I am a good enough artist to actually create anything that would evoke an intent I felt was bad. Okay, I really don't. I'm sorry, I'm just not that good of an artist. But there are artists that are out there who can evoke things.
Right.
Is it right for an artist to create an image that evokes a response that's a destruction of someone else's property?
Well, that's it.
Say someone took one of the landscape pictures of, let's, the one at Mine Lake.
Okay,
That's
yeah.
okay. We're, this group has an intent of, hey, we like to use wilderness areas, and we want to turn that area up to 11. No people ever.
Yeah.
Okay. If Mine Lake wasn't in the wilderness area, the example would be, okay, let's put the wilderness area. Those are wilderness areas. It would be useful. Look at the biology. We say, okay, what all do you want to select? David Johnson's touch highlight Joseph Canyon as an area that can be to project either way. And we're selecting that out based on the intention. So I think that your pieces could be both sense.
So, but that was never the intent of painting them, right? So the intent of the artist has a little bit.
So,
Yeah.
I love that.
I mean, it's an interesting
So
conversation.
what, right? I mean, make your art, and that's why you make art. It's you. You're making art. I'm not writing a poem, I'm not telling a story with words. I make it visual because I can't tell that story otherwise. And for you guys to figure it out, you're on your own. I mean, a lot of artists, you look at their stuff, it's very straightforward, and, you know, if you ever go to MoMA or somewhere like that, someone when I was young, I thought that stuff was shit. You know, I was like, what the hell is this? And now
I'm sorry, Jackson Pollock.
right? So, but, you know, I mean, it's like that evolution of yourself, right? How, don't you feel more open to art as you get older? I'm so much more open than I was when I was like,
Yeah, so my challenge is to try and build bridges and build community, you know, even in this current climate of, our country is very politically divided.
It is, and that's sad.
You know, I know some of my own values, and I may not agree with some of the values of the people that I interact with and, or even photograph, in a rural environment like this that's fairly conservative. Example, I kind of draw the line recently once because of, Chief Joseph Romeo. I've gone to some of the events, the parade, the friendship feast, and things like that. But then this year I was asked to, if I was interested in doing photography and getting mentored by somebody who's one of the, I forget their credentials, but they're the rodeo photographers that get inside, you know. And somebody asked me if I'd be interested, and I said no, because that event is not inclusive. They bring politics into the announcement thing to the people, and it's divisive, and some people in this community don't feel welcome there. So I politely declined, and that's unfortunate, but, you know, it would be otherwise an amazing opportunity. But my challenge is to try and figure out ways to build those bridges between people or in the community and otherwise. So,
I think that idea of building bridges is so positive, needed, and unfortunately, there's not a lot of conversation that's about that in terms of the media, and you know, they only want to show one side of the story. The reason I shared the story of my ex-husband having to arrest the dude from it was because that is the type of story, that's what police officers are really
I
about.
hear you. My grandfather.
And that's never talked about.
My grandfather was a policeman in Chicago.
Oh, boy.
I still have his nightstick. I've worked in private security in downtown Portland, but this was before the social unrest. One of the places I worked was the Apple store, on their security team, and then that place was destroyed. And when I was down there documenting things that were happening as a photographer, if the police were getting rough with people, no one objected that I would photograph them, except perhaps the police, if they were aware of me. And then, but if I saw, like one time I saw some graffiti, and I captured that on a photograph, people in the crowd immediately came up to me and demanded that I delete that. They don't want